this. It's Pollinator Week. And so what is Pollinator Week? Why do we need it? How do you celebrate Pollinator Week? Let's talk about these things. The history and purpose of Pollinator Week is that it was initiated by Pollinator Partnership. And if you were to look them up, you're going to find all sorts of information about pollinators and also what we're celebrating this week. 14 years ago, the US Senate actually unanimously approved designation of a week in June as National Pollinator Week. This was to mark that there's an urgent issue with declining pollinators. And so this week is to help increase knowledge about pollinators and to promote valuable ecosystem services provided by our many pollinators. So what is pollination? Basically, it's pollen transfer from plant to plant. It's usually done through animal transport. So why do we need pollinators? Well, if you like to eat, this is a very good reason. They also pollinate plants that provide food for wildlife and support animal communities. Pollinators are essential workers in the storyline from fruit to flower, and they make sure that we have a huge variety of food. So in this picture that you can see here, all the food here is dependent on bees. So who are the pollinators? There are birds, bats, butterflies, moths, flies, bees, wasps, small animals or small mammals, and most importantly, bees. Bees are really the workhorses for pollination. And all of these visit flowers, they drink nectar, feed off of pollen, and then they transport pollen grains as they move from spot to spot. Pollinators are responsible for providing ecological services to over 85% of the world's flowering plants. They're also important in 35% of global crop production. So why do we talk about bees so much when there's so many different kinds of animals that do pollination? Well, like I said, bees are the workhorses of the pollination world. They are the main pollinators by far. And part of that is because other animals like wasps or beetles or flies, when they are working flowers, they are trying to collect nectar or pollen for themselves. And they may not be true to flower type as they go from one flower to another. They might go from a pansy to a dahlia to another kind of flower, whereas bees actually are true to the flower type. They also are built for pollination. If you look at this bee right here, you can see all of that hair. And it's not just hair that's on, it's not just fuzzy, but it's a special type of hair. It's bifurcated, which means it splits into two, and it actually creates a charge that makes pollen come to the bee. And then bees are able to take that pollen and put it into pollen baskets or places on their body where they're able to take it back to their nest where they're provisioning for their offspring. We can't talk about pollinators without addressing an important topic, which is pollinator decline. So why are bees and other invertebrates in decline? It basically boils down to three things: loss of habitat, pesticide use, and invasive pests and diseases. Now, I'm not going to talk in depth about these things, but I do just want to show what we're dealing with, what our pollinators are dealing with. And when we talk about loss of habitat, we're talking about loss of quantity and quality. There just isn't as much food available for them out there, and they also have to travel farther to find it. Pesticide use, for obvious reasons, is a part of insect decline, and also parasites and diseases. And our honeybees, this is a honeybee right here, and you can see the mite. This is a varroa mite up on top. They are dealing with diseases that are invasive and that are putting additional pressure on them to make it so that they can't work as hard, or it's actually killing them off. So what can you do? I'm going to give you a few tools. One, you can create more food. So we just talked about how you can plant flowers, and please do. There are a lot of things that you can plant. You can plant flowers that are pretty for you. You can also plant flowers that are more useful for our pollinators. You can also put some flowers in your lawn, or let what some people will call weeds actually grow in your lawn. So I have clover growing in my lawn, and I have different kinds of clover. So I have white clover, I have crimson clover. I have a lot of things growing in my lawn. Now, if you live in a neighborhood where maybe you can't have it because of an HOA in your front yard, well, maybe you can designate a part of your backyard where you can let it go a little more wild and help our pollinators. Also, when thinking about what flowers to plant, try to think about native plants, because our native plants are actually more in tune with the life cycles of our native insects, especially our native bees. And so they're going to be more helpful to our bees. Also, if you can put out plants that maybe don't have all the cultivar characteristics that we put in there, like double petals. So that way the plant can put more energy into making pollen and nectar, And also it's easier for insect pollinators to get to the pollen and nectar so that they can provision their nests. You also can create more nesting sites. This might include leaving some of your bare ground undisturbed. It also means that you can also leave areas where leaves can remain whole and undisturbed. You can also leave plants in place through the winter or cut and leave plants with pithy or hollow stems so that insects can create their nests there. Some people like to make bee hotels, and just a word of caution, those can be nice, but if you are not able to sanitize them regularly, then it actually can create more problems than help. It's also better to not make a really big one if you want one, but maybe small ones that you can place all over. Because when we put a place where we cram a whole bunch of bees together, that actually is a great place for parasites and diseases to happen. Also, IPM is really important, so integrated pest management. If you are having trouble with pests in your yard, there are a lot of beneficial insects that can help. And when you are being very careful about what you are putting into your yard, using pesticides at the very last part of your IPM plan, then you're creating an environment where our pollinators can actually help us and we can help them. And we just have a healthier environment. Another thing you can do is get to know the pollinators in your yard. When we talk about IPM, we always talk about you have to identify the insects that could be pests. Well, you also want to know what the beneficial insects are. So get to know them. This is just one of many great guides. This one specifically for Missouri bees, but there are a lot of really helpful guides out there. So how do we celebrate Pollinator Week? If you're in the Kansas City area this weekend, we have a big pollinator event. You can find information about that online. There are also other events going on throughout the state. You could display pollinator artwork or outreach materials in your office, a lobby, or home. You can do a social media campaign. If you do, use hashtag Pollinator Week so people are going to see it. You can highlight pollinators in a blog or a magazine or anything that you do to talk with other people. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do. So please share this information so that other people can hear more about pollinators, why we need them, and benefit they are in our world. And then just a couple more resources for you. Here at Extension, we have a lot of classes that can be helpful if you want to learn more. So if you were to be a part of the Extension Master Gardener program, we talk a lot about our insects and being an environmental steward. That's also a theme in the Missouri Master Naturalist course and program. And of course, we have the Master Pollinator Steward course, which is being taught in various places throughout the state. And I would recommend you learn more about that. If you are on social media, here are a few groups to follow. So Xerces Society has a lot of information. Pollinators, this is with the Pollinator Partnership that is sponsoring Pollinator Week. And then this is my handle on the various social media sites. So anyway, hopefully you will celebrate Pollinator Week and become an environmental steward and helper in keeping our pollinators healthy. Thank you.